When you have an online platform, no matter how big or small that platform is, you might worry that certain secrets are eventually going to come to light. And those secrets, rightly so, might end your career, or at least put it in serious jeopardy. And you might deserve it, which is why I wanted to make this video now. I wanted to apologize before things get bad. I wanted to take accountability for the mistakes I've made and for the things I've said and the things I've done. I would like the chance to explain myself. Because the truth is, I've never been very kind to YA fiction. YA books are something that I, like a lot of people, kind of look down my nose at. But after reading the books of Andrew Joseph White, my opinion on YA has changed a lot. I now see it in a very different light, and I want to talk about that. This is my apology to YA fiction. Now I feel like I have to do a genuine apology because I've wanted to do one of those fake out apology videos for like months. And this is what I chose to do with that. You only get one opportunity to do an I'm sorry full stop style video, and this is mine. I really hope it's worth it. But in all honesty, I have not been kind to YA fiction for a long time. I've looked down my nose at YA for years, and I think it's kind of interesting how I've chosen to be that way, and I'm certainly not the only one. Lots and lots of people look down their nose at YA. It's a kind of interesting thing. First off, there's an enormous amount of misogyny when it comes to YA, because so much fantasy fiction in particular gets labelled as YA just because it was written by a woman, often a young woman. I've seen this myself so many times. A fantasy book written by a woman with a female protagonist, maybe with an intentionally more female fan base or readership, I don't know, gets labelled as YA fiction because women. And that's gross. And we all have internalized misogyny and sexism, no matter what gender we are, because of the patriarchal society we're raised in. And I think I've taken part in that. I definitely did many years ago. Not all fantasy by women is YA, and yet so often it seems to be labelled as such, and it's really frustrating. But the main reason that I personally have looked down my nose at YA is because I've often thought that it would be thematically bland. That it wouldn't challenge me in any way in terms of politics and philosophy and blah blah. That the themes would be on the nose and uninteresting or not there at all. And ironically, as I've said many times in multiple videos, there are themes in everything. Everything is political, so it's very naive of me to have that attitude that there wouldn't be politics and interesting themes in YA fiction when I myself argue that every piece of art is political. Kinda dumb of me. Another reason to dislike YA as someone in her 30s is I'm not a YA. I'm not the target audience, and so I kind of look at YA and go, well, that's not for me. It's for teenagers, it's for young adults. But then there are so many people in their 30s and 40s who devour YA fiction, who make entire blogs and YouTube channels about YA fiction. And I admit that I look down my nose at those people and I think, why aren't you reading something more challenging, something more literary? But recently, I've come to read some YA fiction that is pretty literary, at least in terms of its themes, if not its style of writing, its execution, its genre, whatever. Literary fiction is an often undefinable thing anyway, but if you're coming across YA fiction that is thematically rewarding, it's literary enough for me. After having read a few YA books that I have enjoyed immensely, I want to talk about those books, apologize to YA fiction and say yes, I am now open to reading a lot more YA because YA is as diverse as adult fiction. Because what is YA exactly? When we think YA, I at least often think romance or fantasy or romantasy. Those are the genres that YA seems to pivot towards, but I'm also kind of wrong in that sense, because I recently read the works of Andrew Joseph White, and I'm going to talk about them in a second. And so I've also gotten to thinking, well, what is YA fiction exactly? And I kind of want to talk about that, what I think separates YA and A. Young adult and adult fiction. Let's start with the books that have changed my mind. This is Hell Followed With Us by Andrew Joseph White. And this is his second novel, The Spirit Bears Its Teeth. Both of these books are horror. They are disgusting, especially The Spirit Bares Its Teeth. They are relentlessly grotesque and gore-filled horror stories. They're also YA, published in the US by a publishing house called Peachtree Teen. The word teen is on the spine. These books are intended to be read by teenagers specifically. And so as an adult, you might go, well, that's not me. I'm not a teenager. I'm not going to get anything out of these books. But I read them, and I got a lot out of them. I adored these books. Although if I'm being completely honest, I preferred The Spirit Bares Its Teeth an awful lot to Hell Followed With Us. Hell Followed With Us is a good book. The Spirit Bares Its Teeth is an amazing book. Andrew Joseph White is a queer trans writer from the US. Both of the protagonists in these two books are young trans men. And as I said, they're both horror stories. Hell Followed With Us is set in a near future just after an apocalyptic event. The world has been ravaged by this virus called the Flood, which immediately conjures up religious imagery. And that's on purpose, because, as we find out early on, the Flood was unleashed by an evangelical cult called the Angels. This cult sent the Flood out into the world, killed off most of the population. Many of those who were left alive got turned into these things called graces, which are mutated monstrous things that are either single bodies or multiple human bodies smushed together and just kind of roaming the world like dangerous, hungry, cannibalistic zombies. They are described in varied and grotesque ways. And the Angels did this. And our protagonist, Benji, is a 16-year-old trans guy who was raised by the Angels, and when the book opens, he's escaping that cult. His father helps him escape and dies doing so. Benji's mother bought into what the Angels were selling and joined up, and Benji grew up in this cult. We also find out early on the tragic thing about Benji, which is that he was injected with a mutated version of the Flood virus that will turn him into some kind of a super bioweapon called the Seraph. That's his fate, that's his future. But he's escaped, and very soon after escaping, he manages to find and join up with a queer group of kids who are risking their lives to fight back against the Angels and try and reverse the damage they've done. They're pretty disorganized, they're at each other's throats a lot, and because they're all queer, Andrew Joseph White uses that opportunity to discuss different avenues of queerness and different aspects to the queer community. The Spirit Bares Its Teeth is set in an alternate historical Victorian London, in which a few decades before the book's events, people started being born with purple eyes and the ability to see beyond the veil into the spirit world. Men who were born like this get to join a secret society. Women who are born like this are all but forced into marriage with powerful and wealthy men who will then sire, hopefully, a son who will then get to join that society and have his purple eyes and be nice and special. Our protagonist is a young trans man called Silas. Silas was born with purple eyes and the ability to see beyond the veil. All he wants is to be a surgeon, to be a doctor, just like his older brother is currently training to do. Silas has spent his time reading science textbooks and sneaking into morgues to examine cadavers, etc. When the book begins, he sneaks into a gala hosted by this society, dressed as a boy, in an attempt to get this special stamp that would allow him to join the society and live freely as an adult man. But he is found out during the gala, he is discovered, and he is sent off to a sanatorium for young women with purple eyes who have something called the veil sickness, which doesn't really exist. It is an excuse for men to control women and throw independent, free-thinking, confident young women into an asylum to be forgotten about, tortured, maybe killed, who the fuck knows. When Silas ends up there, he befriends some of the girls, he makes enemies as well, and he quickly discovers that there are ghosts everywhere in this asylum, and he needs to find out why these ghosts are here, who has died here, how and why. And a mystery unfolds, and this, like The Spirit Bares Its Teeth, is a very, very angry novel, and a book full of gore and horror and terror and grossness. Both of these books are undeniably YA, young adult fiction. But why? Because they are disgusting. The horror elements, the gore in these books, instinctively makes me feel like they should be labelled adult fiction. but they are YA. Why is that? And I think the answer to why they are both YA also interestingly explains why I much preferred The Spirit Bares Its Teeth to Hell Followed With Us. First off, these books are thematically exciting. They are queer books about the experiences of young trans people set in both a post-apocalyptic world and an alternate historical London. They are different, but they both share the experiences of young trans people, and the author, Andrew Joseph White, is a trans man. Not only are they both queer, but they are both angry. Politically angry. Hell Followed With Us is about the damage done by cult mentalities within organized religion. People much smarter than I have discussed the difference between a cult and a religion, and it's kind of interesting, especially when there seem to be, especially in the US, branches of Christianity that are cults. And so those lines get interestingly blurred, and it's being explored here in this novel. The damage done by religious dogma and ideology to queer people, and many other kinds of people, but queer people right now, we're kind of a scapegoat and a talking point, so White is kind of focusing on queer people. But the damage done by people and nations and politicians and governments in the name of religion throughout history in multiple different ways to multiple different groups, you could talk about it for literally years. For now, we're focusing on queer people and the damage done by religion. By religious dogma, and specifically the narrative brainwashing of people to believe certain things. Use religion as an excuse, or even a driving force behind inflicting pain and suffering on other people. That's an enormous topic, and something that I, in my naivety, never thought that YA fiction would discuss. It's too big, it's too political, it's too thematically exciting. But Hell Followed With Us is all about fighting back against the narratives and the dogma of organized religion, especially when those religions are condensed into very dangerous cult-like mentalities and behaviors. It's a huge deal. The Spirit Bares Its Teeth is even broader, not focusing just on religion, but on patriarchy, which is larger than religion. Patriarchy is everything and everywhere, unfortunately. Patriarchy feels like an umbrella that covers the whole world. And The Spirit Bares Its Teeth is exploring that. In fact, the book opens with a letter from the author, and I'm going to read a little bit from it. The Spirit Bares Its Teeth was inspired by Victorian England's sordid history of labelling certain people ill or other to justify cruelty against them. Threats of violence enforced strict social norms, often targeting women, queer and disabled people, and other marginalised folks. So, if nothing else, I hope this story means something to you. I hope the scalpel is kind to you. I hope your sutures heal clean. You deserve that much. We all do. The Spirit Bares Its Teeth is aggressively and unapologetically about politics, about patriarchy, about the abuse of minority groups, and it succeeds in exploring all of that. And it is, as I said, unapologetically angry and full of horror and grossness. What makes it specifically YA, in my opinion, and this goes for both novels, is that there is an enormous lack of nuance in terms of how the stories are written and how they are executed. Characters in these books are kind of two-dimensional. What you see is very much what you get. A clear picture is painted of every character pretty much from the get-go. There are occasionally secrets and things that get revealed, but the characters don't often morph and grow, and if they do grow, it's in a very predictable arc to follow. Things feel a little bit simpler. These books feel like they were painted with primary colours. There isn't that much of a palette. There isn't that much diversity of character. There are a lot of archetypes, and characters themselves have no grey areas. There is so much block definition to these characters. They are very much stock things. And I think that that makes these very YA stories, in the sense that they are simpler to follow in a narrative and character sense. And that behaviour and approach from the author also means that the themes and the politics are very much on the nose. Now, I've already said in a lot of detail that the themes are great and the politics are great, blah blah blah, but they're not hidden, they're not nuanced, they're not complex, they don't leave you wondering. They're very much messages that you receive and then you're done. You're not left pondering anything. I think that these books take themes and characters and get to the point address them nice and simply, as if they exist in a very well-lit room. There are no dark corners, there are no shadows, there's nothing grey here. Everything is just on the table. There is a simplicity to how things are written, both in terms of the themes and the characters. Despite definitely becoming a fan of some YA fiction through the books that I've read recently, that still remains true. Whether or not you will call it a criticism is really up to you. I don't think that there is an inherent problem with characters being kind of two-dimensional and simple and themes being very much on the nose. You might end up feeling patronized by it. You might feel like it's kind of a shame that things are too obvious and too well lit. And I certainly do at times. But art is complicated, and also depending on the mood of the reader, you might want something that is simpler and to the point. But when it comes to simplicity, even that in itself is a curious and complicated thing. Simplicity is complicated. Because while the characters are simple and the themes are easy to work out, in fact there is nothing to work out, they are still complex themes to try to write and address to the audience and convey properly. It's not an easy task for a writer to convey these things. And the themes themselves are big, politically big. Exploring the problems of religious dogma and just how broad and dangerous patriarchy is, these are big topics to explore, big things for young adults to read and wrestle with and try and digest and do something with themselves. Delivering all of these things in a simple way is not bad necessarily, just depends on what kind of a reader you are. And I applaud that. It was incredibly naive of me to think that there was just nothing interesting or thematically dense to glean from YA fiction, that it would just be simple escapism. And there's still so much terrible YA out there. I once tried to read a Sarah J. Maas book, and I won't be doing that again. That woman is the queen of YA fiction, and her books, as far as I've seen, are tragically bad. But again, and I talked about this in a video a long time ago, there's nothing inherently wrong with easy escapism. Life is hard. Enjoy your fairy porn. Do what you like with it. There's lots of stuff I do to escape. There are video games that I play that are very thematically dense, like The Last of Us. But I recently finished playing Super Mario Bros. Wonder, which is easy escapism and was one of the best gaming experiences of this year for me. I have a Mario tattoo. I love Mario games. They are not thematically dense. Escapism is important. Things being beautiful and stories being exciting and adventures being thrilling, none of that is necessarily bad. I, as a reader who enjoys very literary and thematically dense things, I'm just thrilled to find that there is YA fiction out there that delivers all of that to me. Stuff that is queer, stuff that is politically angry, stuff that is thematically dense. It just so happens to be written in a very simple and direct way with characters that are very easy to read, and that, as I said before, feeds into why I preferred White's second novel to his first novel. I enjoyed the characters in The Spirit Bares Its Teeth. Hell Followed With Us, however, was more difficult to enjoy in some ways, because through this ragtag group of queers who are trying to fight back against the evil religious cult, you get a lot of unlikable people. And you get a lot of weird, disjointed discussions about queerness. When Benji arrives in this group of people, he immediately adjusts from cult life to talking in what feels like queer online memes, and using language that can take a while to get used to within the queer community. Language like, I don't know, using NB instead of non-binary or ace instead of asexual, just little things like that. Inside jokes about tops and bottoms, kink jokes about edging, stuff like that. Not all of that is actually brought up in the novel, but you get the idea. There are phrases, there are memes, there are cultural elements to queerness that are brought up in this post-apocalyptic wasteland that an indoctrinated boy from a cult, who is coming to terms with his own trans identity and learning to flourish in it, just takes on board and it becomes natural for him, and it's utterly ridiculous. That two-dimensional behaviour is disjointed and strange, and it felt kind of amateur. The ways in which these characters talk are arguably not thematically relevant, and certainly not relevant to the time and place that the novel is set in. This is a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and these people are all arguing about cis gay men being attracted to gay trans men, and it's interesting to talk about, but it just didn't feel like the time and place. That in itself is a really interesting topic, and it is brought up in this book in particular. The conversation around cis gay and lesbian people being attracted to trans gay and lesbian people and being partners with them and having sex with them and blah blah blah. That's a fascinating topic, and it's an ongoing discussion inside the queer community and outside of it by transphobic people who like to stick their nose in where it doesn't belong. But to have that discussion within a post-apocalyptic horror novel was weird as hell, and I didn't enjoy it. The spirit bares its teeth, however. Every discussion that's had, every character interaction, every element of the plot, it all fit the tone, it all fit the setting, it all fit that space and time. And great, well done to Andrew Joseph White. That's what happens when you build upon your first novel and write a better second novel. Great, good for him. But Hell Followed With Us just kind of reminded me of the tropey aspects to character writing in YA fiction that I still don't like, and reinforces the fact that these people are too two-dimensional and often stand for specific archetypes. A character obviously fits a specific purpose and isn't complex enough in their own right. It becomes very transparent that a character exists to make a point or to be a specific tool for the plot rather than just existing and being a complex, grey area person who does good and bad things and changes and shifts as the story goes on. None of that is really present. These people are often stock images rather than 3D models that change and become malleable. And for all of the YA that I've read recently, that kind of remains true. People are often kind of uninterestingly two-dimensional. I keep saying it, but it's the thing that really bothers me about YA fiction. But that in itself is not necessarily a bad thing, especially if you are a young person and YA books are the first things that you're reading and you're getting into literature through YA. These kinds of two-dimensional characters work as a great stepping stone, so I can't fault that either. I mean, I can criticize it from my own perspective, but I can see the merit in it, and I think that's great. Well done to me for doing that. These two are fantastic queer YA horror books, and they have helped me see the merit in YA fiction, and I'm going to be reading a lot more YA from now on. I will not close myself off to young adult fiction. I will take recommendations. I will browse the YA section in bookshops and libraries from now on. I will never turn away from it. I will be as interested in YA fiction as I ever am in any adult fiction of the same genres. If I feel like reading a fantasy book, I'll go to the adult and the YA section. The same for sci-fi, the same for horror. I don't care. YA is as much on the table as adult fiction is for me now, because I've seen the merit in it, I've enjoyed plenty of YA recently, especially these two, and I'm excited to read more. I've changed my mind. I like YA now, I see the merit in it, and I'm excited to read more. If you want to recommend me some great YA fiction in the comments, please do. I would love to know more. I want to read some more great sci-fi, fantasy, and horror young adult fiction. So leave me your recommendations and subscribe for books.